It's one detailed end of urban design, this, and one that we don't explore very often, but one which exercises a profound influence over the way we design our cities and adapt them to the future. So, designing the underworld, rethinking the way we design and manage the space beneath our streets. These two shots encapsulate the issues. On the left-hand side, you've got a street. It's ugly, it's obstructed by waste, which has been routinely, as part of the regular waste collection process, left on the surface. There are trip hazards, it's an uneven surface, it's difficult to maintain an even surface on account of the digging up of the footway periodically, and all this costs money to maintain. And below the surface, there's a complex web of pipes, cables, ducts. And when the utility companies go in to maintain these, the tendency is to damage the equipment of other utilities companies. It costs money to do this. It's not really sustainable. And there are streets, certainly in London, where the utilities are so densely packed, it's pretty much impossible to renew things like major gas mains. So, anyone know where this is? No? It's Oxford Circus. Or how about this? This one is the Strand. Here, anybody recognise this one? No, I'm surprised you can't pick these up. This is the Edinburgh tram outside Haymarket Station. And we know that the problems with utilities are buried utilities that needed to be either diverted or maintained prior to the tram tracks going down, led to a substantial overspend on the contract, and it led to the line being terminated in Edinburgh rather than going down to Leith, as had been the original plan. So we're dealing with a major issue here. Another example, you can see those flimsy cables being draped across. It's really difficult for road workers to operate under these conditions. And there you can see, that's just a coaxial cable, I think, that's been laid a few inches below the road surface. How they managed to dig around that, it's quite remarkable. Gower Street in London, you see the same sort of thing. These are main core London streets, and we've got this very strange way of approaching utilities. It can't be efficient. And this, anyone know where this is? A highly disfigured road surface, which has been opened a number of occasions and is collapsing, is Trafalgar Square. And this is maybe what ought to be one of the most prestigious sites in London. It can be like this. This is Poynton, a really high quality public realm scheme. Another shot. But if these surfaces are opened up, it breaks the structure of the road, and failure soon follows on, unless the work is done exceptionally well, and that is often not the case. This example from Sheffield shows what can happen. So we turn the clock back a bit to the Regency period, and in this time, the housing and the streets were designed together as one. The buildings are functional. There's places to cook stuff, to accommodate staff. But underneath the street, there is cellarage built in, where coal could be stored, maybe waste, who knows. But it's a very elegant and integrated solution. And we are nowhere near that now. 1910, RIBA, Royal Institution of British Architects, held a town planning conference, 1910. This was from a paper by Eugene Henard on Rue Future. And you can see there the overall approach to the design of the street incorporated into the cross-sectional design of the buildings as well. So we're talking about not just architecture, but a fully functional urban cross-section. Surely we should be thinking in terms of that. Well, that's the sort of thing you see now. Waste is dealt with visibly, unattractively. The footway outside is pretty much wrecked. It's not an attractive place. And yet, when these properties were first built, this would have been amongst the most prestigious of addresses in this particular town. So, streets for the 21st century. Above ground, we want something that's attractive, allows barrier-free movement for all people, both disabled and fully ambulant, free of trips, free of potholes. Ideally, we should be able to leave the surface alone without having to dig the thing up at all. And it should be easy to clean as well. I don't know whether you notice that people are apt to drop chewing gum, and if you go down to Farringdon railway station, you can see chewing gum has become a secondary surfacing material. It's difficult to clear off bitumen macadam surfaces. It's easy enough to do off stone, but with the stone surface, you need to have a robust structure that lies underneath it. And below ground, we've got all of the essential utilities. We need to plant trees, waste collection, which Peter will be talking about, suds, flood storage. Well, I'll go on to these in a little bit more detail now. Firstly, trees. They add so much to the quality of our experience of towns and cities. But so often we see this, and this is a tree, I think it's down on the embankment, and you can see its roots are competing with cables and water supply pipes. That's not an ideal circumstance in which a tree can flourish. The Trees and Design Action Group published this, Trees and Hard Landscape, a Guide for Delivery. And on the, on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the illustration from Designing Streets, and also Manual for Streets published in 2007 for tree pits. They are part of street design. What do trees need? I won't go into these in detail, but the thing to do is to download a copy of Trees and Hard Landscape for your own use. Trees need they're living organisms. Their roots need space to absorb water and to exchange gases. Without that, they're going to suffer and potentially die. There are different planting systems that the guide discusses. Raft systems. It's to take the weight of whatever is on the surface off the roots of the trees and to provide them room to grow. There's cage systems, there's proprietary concrete products, and Green Blue Urban, who were the sponsors of the 2016 National Urban Design Conference. This is one of their projects outside St Paul's, and you can see and in a new scheme, these trees are doing remarkably well, and they've achieved quite a good size in a remarkably short period of time. Suds and surface water flooding. This is a shot from the Environment Agency website showing where we are, which is here, and the risk of flooding in the surrounding area, caused by intense rainfall that tends to happen in the summer, spring, summer, and early autumn. This is an example of a rainstorm in Bracknell, which deposited a huge amount of water over a very narrow location in Bracknell back in May 2000. And these sorts of things are going to increase in frequency as the climate increases in temperature. Not to be confused with flooding from main rivers. That's a different sort of flooding altogether, and it's caused by a different type of weather, large weather systems that tend to sweep in from the Atlantic. This is more to do with localized convective storms, thunderstorms, that sort of thing, causes localized, intense flooding, whereas almost all surfaces start to accumulate water. Streets flood, and the rainwater channels into the lower lying areas and basements. What can we do? Here's the rain gardens in Ashford in Kent as part of the removal of the ring road scheme there. And in terms of guidance, Syria, the Construction Industry Research and Information Association, published a SUDS manual in 2015. It uses some of the graphics out of the Trees and Design Action Group publications, and it's encouraging to see two organisations pooling their resources and developing a common message. So, an example for a fairly low-cost measure, cross-sections of streets, a wider street, but you can see it incorporates the attenuation of rainwater as well as landscaping. It's more of a combined solution. And these are the sorts of things that you see installed below, rainwater storage. And a bit of technical detail there. The problem with SUDs can be that if the highway is opened, the pipe work can be damaged, and the SUDs cease to operate effectively as SUDs. And it's why maybe we need a more considered and organised approach to the way we manage the subsurface. Water recycling. Syria also published a document a couple of years ago on water-sensitive urban design, and the Urban Design Group were pleased to support this. And an illustration of what could a water-sensitive city look like. It's about using wastewater, treating it, recycling it, trying to get a circular flow of water, as well as things like green roofs. But to do this requires an infrastructure. And in California, they've started to introduce a system of these mauve or purple pipes. You need big ones, and to get the water through to houses, you need small ones. And it's yet another thing that would need to be added to the surface below streets. District heating, another example. The pipes here are particularly big, often going nowadays with showcase architect designed heat facilities. Also, as well as district heating, you can get district cooling. You can transfer the waste heat from one building to provide space heating for an adjoining building or down the street. But to do it, you need an infrastructure, and the place for that infrastructure at the moment is below ground, and it has to compete for space with whatever's already there. So, yes, an aspiration of having fully designed streets. It's a funny thing that maybe when mankind or humankind started living in towns and cities, the way they were organised very much reflected need, weather, climate, geology, human behaviour. But I think as time has gone on, more and more, the way streets are designed and the subsurface organised is more a reflection of the legislation and the organisation that's developed over many decades and even centuries. And I thought it would be worthwhile just going over some of these things. And this slide, by the way, is by Dexter Hunt, who's at the University of Birmingham and is studying one of the main alternatives, the possibility of combined utilities, tunnels and ducts. And that's his slide on the right, showing different options. Combined utilities ducts that are flush with the surface, flush with the footway, say, or maybe something at a little greater depth, or maybe even quite a substantial depth below the surface. And there's an entrance to a combined utilities duct. I think it's on the junction of Queen Street, and I can't remember the other street, but if you want to go and have a look at it, it's about 15 minutes walk that way. The streets around the Aldwych and Kingsway have combined utilities tunnels. Anyway, the legislation, I just put up a little bit of the legislation that influences how streets are evolving. We've got the Highways Act, 1980, creates a duty to maintain the highway. There's the New Roads and Streetworks Act, 1991, and this is the main bit of legislation that controls the behaviour of utilities. And of course, utilities are not all of the things that we've been discussing tonight. It doesn't include district heating. It doesn't include waste. So there's duties to coordinate street works that are placed on the street authority, the maintenance of street works, register. There are codes of practice, and that's the code of practice for coordination of street works and work for road purposes and related matters. The Traffic Management Act creates a sort of lane rental potential. It also places a duty on highway authorities, or is it traffic authorities? I get confused, to secure the expeditious movement of traffic and to remove barriers to movement. There's mention in the General Permitted Development Order that gives statutory undertakings some powers to undertake certain development generally small development, without planning permission. But there's also some very important legislation, including, I put down here the Equality Act and also the Public Services Social Value Act. This legislation has not really been applied to the above legislation by the authorities that are actually covered by it. So the Equality Act, it requires every public authority in carrying out its functions to have due regard to the need to, and a number of different things, such as the need to eliminate discrimination that is unlawful under the Equality Act, the need to promote equality of opportunity. And when it comes to having specifying a waste collection system that involves blocking the footway arbitrarily and relatively randomly, at least once a week, I just question whether that sort of a system is lawful under the Equality Act. In my opinion, it's not. I doubt whether many waste management contracts have had due regard to that particular duty under the Equality Act. Similarly, the Public Services Social Value Act, that requires local authorities, when letting contracts, to have regard to the well-being of the people who live in the area. So I think there's some legal levers that invite us to rethink the way streets are designed and managed, and the subsurface of streets in particular. In terms of design guidance, the main guidance we've got is from the National Joint Utilities Group. On the top right, you see recommendations, the recommended positioning of utility apparatus in a 2-metre wide footway. That's the only diagram in this particular guidance. They produced about 4 years ago, a guidance note on town centre redevelopments, but there's no actual diagrams, design-related diagrams. They just refer to considering diverting out of the area altogether, or introducing service corridors, or maybe providing ducts. So one of the questions is, do we need a more sophisticated array of guidance, a more comprehensive array of guidance that covers how we're going to treat the surface, the space underneath our streets in a more comprehensive and holistic way? And my last slide is about ownership and operation. And again, there are complexities here. If you're a highway authority, all of the preceding acts apply. If it's a private street, then many of them don't. And there is far greater potential to exercise control over what's happening. And we know that house builders, there is a trend in some areas for house builders to retain highway in private ownership and not have that highway adopted. Do we need a planning regime for the space below our streets? Ground use planning, one might call it. Are there different ways of organising the way utilities are managed? And Atkin's presentation about providing the utilities, the networks, and then selling them on, I think is an interesting way forward. There are many different approaches here. But these slides were just to illustrate that there's other issues than the physical side of things. And I think, unfortunately, the legislation and the organisation is causing us major problems. It's hugely complex, and my experience is that people know about one area of law and not the other. And it's not surprising, considering the complexity.